A lone cargo hauler, Kellen Hayes, stumbles upon a dying alien woman in the dark corners of a forgotten space station. His blood saves her life, but it does something far more dangerous. The two species collide in a way no one could predict, unlocking a force that could change the galaxy. But their enemies, a powerful secret organization, will stop at nothing to harness the power within them. As pirates close in and deadly secrets are exposed, Kellen and the woman Lyra must decide: survive or unleash the truth that could shake the very fabric of their world. What happens next is beyond anyone's control. Stay tuned to see what happens when two bloodlines merge, leading to unimaginable power and peril. If you're new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. Kellen Hayes had seen his fair share of backwater stations, but nothing quite like Vanguard Station. It was a floating hodgepodge of metal, rusted pipes, and leaking coolant, drifting through the empty blackness of space. This station wasn't like the well-funded, corporate-controlled stations he was used to. Here, everything seemed to fall apart all at once. Parts of the station were sweltering hot, while others were freezing cold with malfunctioning environmental controls, leaving passengers to deal with the discomfort. Kellen's boots echoed on the metal deck as he walked through the dimly lit corridors. His flight jacket was tight around his shoulders, and he adjusted the collar, his rough hands rubbing against the fabric. He was a man of action, a cargo hauler by trade, and at 35, he wasn't the young man he used to be. His dark hair had started to show signs of graying at the temples, and the muscles in his frame were a testament to years spent loading cargo and hauling shipments, rather than relying on others to do the heavy lifting. Damn backwater stations, he muttered under his breath, eyeing the surroundings. He passed by a small viewport and caught his reflection in the glass. His rough features, scar above his right eyebrow, calloused hands, and a weathered face, told the story of a man who'd fought for every credit and never backed down from a challenge. But today he wasn't here to fight or deal with any challenges. He was just here to refuel his ship, the Star Vagrant, and get back on course to the next destination. The market district lay ahead, a maze of stalls and shops where traders from countless worlds hawked their wares. The air was filled with a cacophony of voices, some speaking languages Kellen couldn't even begin to understand. The smells of strange spices and unfamiliar foods hit him as he entered the bustling area. It was chaotic, but it was a welcome distraction from the monotony of the station's corridors. Kellen made his way through the market, his thoughts drifting to the next job he had lined up. That's when he heard it. A loud crash followed by a scream. Without thinking, he turned toward the sound and moved quickly through the crowded corridor, his boots clanking against the floor. As he approached the source of the noise, he noticed a small shop off to the side, its windows smeared with grime. He could barely see inside, but his instincts told him something was wrong. A faint pool of blood was starting to spread beneath the door. Kellen's heart skipped a beat as he rushed forward, forcing the door open. The sight that greeted him was far worse than he expected. Inside, the shop was a mess. Display cases were shattered, their contents scattered across the floor. And there, lying in the middle of the chaos, was a woman. No, not a woman. A creature. She was unlike anything Kellen had ever seen before. Her skin was a soft shade of emerald green. Her long white hair shimmered like starlight, and her delicate features had an otherworldly beauty. But what caught his attention the most was the deep wound in her side. Blood was pooling around her, staining the floor a dark red. She was unconscious, and her body seemed eerily still. Kellen didn't waste a second. Despite the bizarre sight in front of him, his instincts kicked in. He moved toward her, careful to avoid the shards of glass scattered on the floor. As he knelt beside her, his eyes met hers for a brief moment. Her golden eyes flickered open, dull with pain and confusion. "Hey, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice steady but urgent. She coughed weakly but couldn't respond. Kellen's heart raced as he quickly tore off his jacket and pressed it against the wound in her side, trying to stop the bleeding. He looked around, seeing a small crowd gathering at the door, but no one moved to help. Their faces were cold, almost curious, as if they were watching a show rather than witnessing a life-or-death situation. "Kellen," he cursed under his breath. "Bunch of useless bastards." It was clear that no one here cared about the woman's life. He couldn't stand by and do nothing, so he scooped her into his arms. She was surprisingly light, and despite the artificial gravity, he had to adjust his grip to make sure she didn't slip from his hold. "Which way to the medical bay?" he asked a nearby passerby. An elderly senton with blue skin pointed down the hall. "3 levels down?" "Section D," they replied, but then hesitated. "But human," they began. "She's—" "Doesn't matter," Kellen interrupted, already moving. His boots clanged against the metal steps as he rushed through the station, trying to ignore the cold shivers that ran down his spine. Her body was growing cold in his arms, and he could feel her pulse weakening with each passing moment. "Stay with me," he thought desperately. The medical bay wasn't much better than the rest of the station. Old equipment lined the walls, and the lights flickered above. It looked like a place where the ill and injured came to die, not to heal. But it was all they had. "Put her here," a voice called out from behind a data pad. The doctor was tall and thin, with gray skin and multiple eyes scanning through information on his handheld device. Kellen laid the woman down gently on the examination table, his hand still pressed against the wound to stop the bleeding. "What happened?" the doctor asked, barely looking up from the screen. "Found her bleeding out in a shop," Kellen explained, his voice strained. "Looks like she got caught in some kind of fight or accident." The doctor nodded, his eyes narrowing as he scanned. "The woman with a handheld device. Severe lacerations, internal bleeding. She's lost too much blood. We need to do a transfusion immediately." Kellen didn't hesitate. "Do it," he barked. "Just make sure she doesn't die on me." As the doctor prepared for the transfusion, Kellen watched, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this woman, something more than just a random alien stranger. There was a connection between them, one he couldn't explain. And as her life hung in the balance, Kellen couldn't help but wonder, what was he getting himself into? The story had only just begun. As the medical bay's lights flickered overhead, Kellen sat by Lyra's side, his hand still resting lightly on hers. He watched in silence as Dr. Kale prepared the transfusion equipment. The sterile smell of the room mixed with the faint hum of aging medical machines. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of the market and the wreckage of the shop where Kellen had found her. Lyra's breathing was shallow, and the pallor of her skin made her look almost ghostly in the dim light. Her once radiant emerald complexion had dulled, and her silver-white hair, usually shimmering with an ethereal glow, now lay limp across the medical table like strands of clouded silk. Kellen couldn't help but feel a strange sense of responsibility growing within him, as though his actions would somehow alter the course of not just her life, but his own as well. "How much longer?" Kellen asked, his voice gruff, as he glanced at Dr. Kale. "Not long now," Kale muttered, his forearms moving quickly to prepare the transfusion. He was calm, perhaps too calm for the situation, but Kellen noticed the slight hesitation in his movements. The doctor was about to perform a medical procedure that had never been done before, mixing human and alien blood. Even the doctor, seasoned as he was, seemed to be aware of the magnitude of what was about to happen. "You're sure about this?" Kellen asked, his eyes narrowing. He had learned a lot about medical practices in his time as a cargo hauler, but even he knew that mixing blood types from 2 completely different species could lead to dangerous, even fatal consequences. "There's no record of this ever being attempted," Kyle replied, looking up from his work for the first time. "But she's already dying. The transfusion is her only chance." Kellen felt a knot tighten in his chest as he watched the machine's display light up, confirming the compatibility of their blood types. He could feel a pulse of something strange, something different, flowing through him as the transfusion began. He had given blood countless times before, but this felt like something far beyond the simple act of saving someone's life. As the blood transferred from Kellen's body into Lyra's, Kellen's mind began to race. He watched as her body responded, her skin slowly shifting from pale to a faint green glow. The healing process seemed almost too fast, too unnatural. There was no denying that something remarkable was happening, something far beyond the ordinary realm of medical science. But, as much as he wanted to believe the transfusion would save her, A deeper, unexplainable connection began to form between them. Suddenly, Lyra's eyelids fluttered open. Her golden eyes, which had been clouded with pain and confusion, now looked clearer, more focused. She blinked slowly, as if awakening from a long, dreamless sleep. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice weak but melodic. "You're safe," Kellen replied, his voice softening as he moved closer to her. "You're in the medical bay on Vanguard Station. You were hurt, but He stopped himself, unsure of what to say. What was there to say? He had just saved her life, but it felt like something else was happening too. Something bigger than either of them. "You saved me?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but there was a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Kellen nodded, though the words he wanted to say, "I couldn't just leave you to die," caught in his throat. It was true, but it wasn't the whole story. "Yes," he said, squeezing her hand lightly. "But you should rest. You've been through a lot." She looked at him for a moment, studying his face as though trying to decipher something. Her gaze was intense, almost searching, as though she was trying to make sense of what had happened. "You are different," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I feel it, in my veins. Your blood, it's..." She trailed off, her eyes widening with realization. "It's changing me." Kellen frowned, not fully understanding. He didn't know what she meant by changing her. He had heard of some species with adaptive biology, capable of healing faster, or even regenerating. But changing her blood? That was something he had never encountered before. Before he could speak, Dr. Kale interrupted, his voice clipped and urgent. "That's what I was afraid of." The doctor's eyes scanned the readings on his console. "This is unprecedented. I never expected this level of compatibility, let alone the speed of her recovery." Lyra's breathing deepened as she shifted slightly in her bed, her body becoming more and more alert. The glow that had once been faint in her skin now pulsed, rhythmically, almost as if her entire body was in sync with the flow of Kellen's blood inside her. Her muscles tightened and she sat up with ease, surprising both Kellen and Dr. Kale. "What's happening to me?" Lyra asked, her voice barely a whisper, but there was a deep, hidden power in it now. She looked at Kellen with new eyes that saw not just the man who had saved her, but someone she could not yet fully comprehend. "It's your biology," Dr. Kale said slowly, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Your species is known for its adaptability, but this is beyond anything I could have anticipated. Your cells are integrating his human blood in a way that is accelerated. I don't fully understand it yet, but it's as if your body is evolving, adapting faster than I've ever seen." Lyra's gaze flickered to Kellen, and she seemed to study him more intently than before. She was no longer just an alien woman who had been saved by his blood. She was something else entirely, something that was now inexplicably linked to him, and as she looked at him, Kellen couldn't help but feel a strange pull in his chest, a connection that he couldn't explain. "What does this mean?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and awe. Kellen swallowed hard, his mouth dry. "I don't know, but we need to find out." The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air. Kellen had made the decision to help her, but this was more than he had bargained for. The connection between them was undeniable, but the consequences were still unclear, and just as he thought they might have a moment to process it all, the loud alarm blared throughout the station, sending a shock of adrenaline through Kellen's veins. The lights in the medical bay flickered as a warning message flashed on the screen. "Unauthorized vessels detected. Hostile signatures approaching. All civilians proceed to designated shelter areas." Kellen's heart skipped a beat. The pirates were here. Lyra, still trying to stabilize, looked at him, her golden eyes flashing with newfound strength. "We need to leave now." Kellen's mind raced. They had no time to waste. "Stay close to me," he said firmly. "We're not leaving without answers." And with that, they rushed out of the medical bay, the beginning of their journey together marked by danger, uncertainty, and a bond that neither could yet understand, but both would soon come to realize was far more significant than either could have imagined. As the alarms blared and the flashing lights of the station grew more frantic, Kellen could feel the weight of urgency pressing down on him. His mind raced as he glanced back at Lyra, who was now standing, though her movements were slow and her breathing shallow. The blood transfusion was affecting her in ways neither of them could fully comprehend, and now, with the pirates closing in on Vanguard Station, there was no time for answers. Kellen grabbed her arm, steadying her as she swayed slightly. She was no longer the weak, bleeding stranger he'd found in the market, but neither was she fully herself. Her appearance had changed. Her skin now had a soft, iridescent glow that seemed to pulse with every breath she took. There was a strength in her eyes now, a spark that hadn't been there before. But what was this power? Was it the blood transfusion, or something else entirely? "We need to move," Kellen said, his voice firm, though there was a tinge of worry beneath it. Lyra nodded, but her voice was hesitant as she spoke. "The pirates. They're here for more than just me." "What do you mean?" Kellen asked, tightening his grip on her shoulder as they moved down the corridor toward the docking bay. Lyra glanced at him, her expression serious. "I was studying human adaptability, how your species can survive in environments that would destroy other species. But there's something else, something bigger. My research was getting too close to something that the pirates, no, the Initiative, as they call themselves, don't want to be discovered." Kellen felt a cold shiver run down his spine as her words sank in. He had heard whispers of shady organizations, groups working behind the scenes, gathering information on all kinds of species, but he hadn't expected to be caught up in their schemes. "What exactly are they after?" Kellen asked, his voice low, his mind already running through escape routes and contingency plans. Lyra's golden eyes flickered with fear and determination. "They believe that the key to military dominance is the ability to adapt quickly, to evolve in real time. My research showed that the right kind of genetic compatibility could enable beings to rapidly integrate traits from other species. If they get their hands on my work, they'll try to create a hybrid army, an unstoppable force. And the transfusion, the blood between us, is the key." Kellen didn't know what to say. He wasn't a scientist, nor did he care much for politics or military power struggles, but the idea of hybrid armies, human and alien, sent a chill through him. What had he gotten himself into? "We can't let them have it," Kellen muttered under his breath, trying to focus. They had reached the docking bay by now, the cold air of the outside world seeping into the station's walls. He looked around for a way to escape. The sound of blaster fire echoed in the distance, rattling the walls and shaking the floor beneath their feet. Kellen's hand instinctively moved to his holster, but he didn't pull his weapon just yet. He needed to think. "How do we stop them?" he asked, turning back to Lyra. Her expression was a mix of fear and resolve, but Kellen could see that there was something she wasn't saying, something more than just her research. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. The pirates were here. Kellen turned sharply, his heart pounding in his chest as he saw a group of armored figures rounding the corner. They were wearing black combat suits with crimson markings, the Crimson Talon Raiders. "Stay close," Kellen ordered, pulling Lyra into a nearby alcove. The pirates didn't seem to notice them at first, too focused on the chaos around them, but Kellen knew it was only a matter of time before they would. He scanned the hallway looking for an exit, but it was no use. The pirates had surrounded the entire docking bay. There was no way out, at least not without a fight. Kellen's mind was already calculating his options. The pirates were trained and heavily armed, but they were also predictable. If he could get them distracted just long enough, they might have a chance. But Lyra, he had to protect her. She was the key, not just to their survival, but to stopping the Initiative's plans. Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. "I can help," she said, her tone steady, but her eyes were glowing with an unnatural intensity. Kellen turned to face her, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" "My blood is different now. I can sense their intentions. I can feel their thoughts, their movements." She stepped forward, her gaze unfocused as she concentrated, her hands trembling slightly. "I can manipulate their systems, their targeting. I don't know how, but I can do it." Kellen's eyes widened as he realized what she meant. "You're telling me you can control their weapons?" Lyra nodded, though it was clear she was still getting used to this new power inside her. "Not control exactly, but I can make them hesitate. I can project confusion, fear. It's like I'm in their minds." It was insane. But at this point, Kellen wasn't about to question it. If Lyra could do what she said, it might be their only chance. "All right," Kellen said, drawing his weapon. "On my signal, do whatever you can to slow them down. We'll take them out one by one." They waited in tense silence as the pirates drew closer, their weapons trained on anyone who dared to move. Kellen's grip tightened on his blaster, but he wasn't ready to act just yet. They needed to be smart about this. Finally, when the pirates were within range, Lyra closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her body shimmered with the faintest light, her pulse racing as she focused on the group of raiders. The first pirate hesitated. His hand shook slightly as he aimed his weapon at Kellen, but the hesitation was all Kellen needed. He sprang into action, firing 2 quick shots, both hitting their mark. The raider crumpled to the ground. Lyra's eyes snapped open, her golden irises flashing with an eerie brilliance. The remaining pirates paused, confusion flashing across their faces. Kellen took advantage of the moment, ducking behind a crate, for cover. He fired again, taking down another pirate, but Lyra's power was beginning to wear off. She staggered slightly, the strain of using her abilities starting to take its toll. Kellen could see her struggle to hold herself together, but the determination in her eyes kept him moving forward. "Keep going," she whispered, her voice hoarse but unwavering. With Lyra's help, Kellen managed to take down the remaining pirates, each shot carefully calculated to incapacitate rather than kill. The last raider fell to the ground, his weapon slipping from his hand. Kellen stood, panting from the adrenaline rush. He looked at Lyra, who was now sitting on the ground, exhausted but alive. "You did it," he said, his voice full of awe. Lyra smiled weakly, her once glowing skin dimming slightly as her energy faded. "We did it," she corrected him, reaching out to take his hand. The pirates were no longer a threat, but the larger, more dangerous forces were still out there, and now Kellen realized they had a much bigger battle ahead of them, one that could change the fate of both their species. "We need to move," Kellen said, helping her to her feet. "This is far from over," and with that, they disappeared into the shadows of the station, ready to face whatever came next. The shuttle rocked violently as the last of the pirates' ships exploded in a burst of light behind them. Kellen's hands gripped the control yoke tightly as the stars outside the viewport blurred with the shuttle's rapid acceleration. He glanced over at Lyra, who was seated beside him in the co-pilot's chair. The glow of the shuttle's dim control lights reflected off her now pale skin, and her eyes were shut tight, her chest rising and falling with each shallow breath. Kellen's heart ached for her. She had pushed herself too far with her newfound powers, her empathic abilities bending, the raider's will to her own, only to leave her physically drained. He knew they needed to keep moving. Lyra couldn't hold out for much longer if she didn't rest. But he also knew that time was of the essence. They were being hunted by forces far more dangerous than pirates, and the stakes had grown impossibly high. "How are you holding up?" Kellen asked, trying to sound casual as he piloted the shuttle through the debris field. His eyes flicked nervously between the control panels and the stars streaking by. Lyra's voice was soft, strained. "I'm fine, just need to recover." She swallowed hard, her eyes fluttering open briefly. "Thank you for helping me back there. I don't know how long I could have kept them at bay." Kellen didn't respond immediately. Instead, he focused on keeping the shuttle on course, his thoughts racing. Lyra's ability to manipulate their attackers' minds had saved them, but it had come at a cost. The blood transfusion they had undergone, his blood mixing with hers, had done something neither of them fully understood. It had not only healed her but transformed her. She was stronger now, more powerful, and the bond between them was undeniable. But what did it mean for her? For them? He couldn't shake the feeling that they were only scratching the surface of something far greater. The familiar hum of the shuttle's engines filled the silence between them, and Kellen let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His mind drifted back to the chaos of the station, the pirates and the mysterious attackers who seemed to be after Lyra and her research. They hadn't even begun to understand the full scope of what was at stake. Lyra had mentioned something about the Initiative, a shadowy group bent on harnessing the power of interspecies adaptation for military purposes. "Tell me more about this initiative," Kellen asked, his voice low and urgent. "What are they, after? Why would they be so desperate to get their hands on your research?" Lyra's face tightened, and for a moment her golden eyes flashed with a mixture of fear and defiance. She closed her eyes again, her breath steadying as she spoke. "The Initiative has been around for decades. They've been experimenting with genetic enhancements, trying to create super soldiers, spies, beings capable of adapting to any environment, any combat situation. But all their attempts have failed. They've never been able to create a true hybrid species, one that can quickly integrate the abilities of other races without side effects. My research, it showed that there might be a way, but I never imagined it would work like this. The fusion of human and Zeltrian blood, it's something entirely new." Kellen frowned, trying to piece it all together. "And you think they're after you because of the hybrid?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes. If they capture me, they'll have access to the research data, and they'll be able to replicate the process. They've been trying to create a soldier who can adapt to any environment, even one that's hostile to their biology. The possibilities are endless, but they don't care about the consequences." Kellen's mind raced as he absorbed her words. A hybrid, a perfect fusion of two species, could change the balance of power across the galaxy. The Initiative wanted that power, but what would they do with it? Control entire populations? Create an army of adaptable soldiers who could blend into any culture or planet? "We need to find out more about this," Kellen said, his voice growing more determined. "We can't let them get to you or your research, and we can't just run forever. We need to fight back, Lyra." Lyra's eyes opened at that, her golden irises glinting in the low light of the shuttle. "You're right. Running isn't an option anymore. But fighting back? We need allies. There's one person who might help us, but it's risky." Kellen's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" "Her name is Elder Nara. She's the leader of a sanctuary in the Twilight Nebula, a place hidden from the rest of the galaxy. She's been studying Zeltrian biology for years and is one of the few who understands what's happening to me, what my blood has done to me. She might have answers, but she's also a bit of a recluse. Getting to her won't be easy." Kellen didn't hesitate. "We're going to find her, whatever it takes." The determination in his voice caught Lyra by surprise. She studied him, as if seeing him for the first time. Despite everything they had been through in such a short time, Kellen's willingness to stand by her, to fight for her, made her feel something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. "Thank you," Lyra said, her voice soft but full of gratitude. "You don't know what this means to me." Kellen smiled at her, though the weight of the situation wasn't lost on him. "I'm not doing this for gratitude. I'm doing this because you're the only person who knows how to stop what's coming. And if you've learned anything from the past couple of days, it's that I don't walk away from a fight." They locked eyes, and for a moment there was a deep understanding between them. Kellen wasn't just helping Lyra out of a sense of obligation or duty. He was choosing to stand by her, to fight for her, because he believed in the cause. He believed in her. As they set course for the Twilight Nebula, the shuttle hurtling through the stars, Kellen knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The stakes had never been higher, and the dangers ahead were unknown. But with Lyra by his side, he felt like they could face anything the galaxy threw at them. Lyra's voice broke through the silence, her words low and full of meaning. Kellen, I can feel it. The connection between us. It's growing, stronger. It's more than just the blood. It's something deeper. Kellen didn't respond immediately. Instead, he allowed the silence to settle between them, his hand gripping the yoke. He could feel it too. The pull, the bond. Something was changing inside of him, and he wasn't sure if it was the blood transfusion or something else entirely. But whatever it was, he couldn't ignore it. I feel it too, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. They didn't speak again for the rest of the journey. The only sound that filled the shuttle was the hum of the engines and the distant stars that beckoned them forward, toward an uncertain future. But no matter the challenges ahead, Kellen knew one thing for sure. He wasn't about to lose Lyra. Not now, not ever. And so the two of them, connected by blood, by fate, moved toward their destiny.